All right, let's dive right into this one. Today we're exploring a seriously mind-bending concept from Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy, the two very different faces of illusion. Now, if you've always thought of illusion as, just some negative force keeping us in the dark, well, get ready, because we're about to flip that whole idea completely on its head in this explainer. But real quick, before we really get going, I need to explicitly state that this explainer is based on source material researched by Sachin J. Karnik. The sheer depth of the theology we're unpacking today comes directly from his amazing research, so we want to give credit exactly where it's due. So I want you to imagine something for a second. Picture trying to treat a king, an emperor, or, I don't know, the absolutely omnipotent ruler of the entire cosmos like your best friend, or even like your own kid. It's kind of impossible, right? The sheer crushing majesty of a being like that makes true, spontaneous intimacy basically a non-starter. I mean, how do you casually joke around with the literal architect of reality? Keep that paradox in the back of your mind, because figuring that out is the exact problem we're solving today. Here is how we're going to break it all down. First, the two potencies of the divine. Second, Mahamaya, or the material illusion. Third, the problem of divine majesty. Fourth, Yoga Maya, the power of intimacy. And finally, the relational absolute. All right, kicking things off with Section 1, two potencies of the divine, mapping the energies. So, to understand how this paradox of intimacy is actually solved, we first have to map out the energies. According to the research, Krishna is the source of infinite potency, but we can organize all of that into three main buckets. First, on the outside, you have the external energy, the Bahira Ganga Shakti. This is the material cosmos, the physical world of condition and limitation. Then, on the inside, you've got the internal energy, the Antaranga Shakti. This is the intrinsic spiritual power, the realm of pure consciousness and bliss. And right smack in the middle? That's the marginal energy, the Tatastha Shakti. And that, my friends, is where the individual soul, the jiva, actually sits. The jiva is eternally part of the divine, but because it sits right on that margin, it can be influenced by either the material world on the outside or the spiritual reality on the inside. Which brings us to Section 2, Mahamaya, the material illusion. So what exactly happens when that marginal soul, that jiva, gets pulled outward into the external energy? Well, Mahamaya acts as a binding force. It's the external material potency, that Bahiranga Shakti stepping into action. And what does it do? It totally obscures the soul's true spiritual identity. It literally causes the jiva to misidentify with its temporary physical body and mind. You basically forget your eternal nature and get completely entangled in the material world, convinced you're just your physical form and your worldly roles. It's an illusion of ignorance. It binds you entirely. Moving right along to Section 3, the problem of divine majesty. Now, let's say a soul actually manages to escape that material bondage of Mahamaya. They achieve liberation, they turn their attention fully toward the divine. Boom! Suddenly, a brand new obstacle to intimacy pops up, and it's called Aishvarya. This translates to divine majesty, absolute sovereignty, and cosmic power. And the natural, totally understandable reaction to Aishvarya is an overwhelming sense of awe and reverence. But think about it. If you are constantly crushed by the sheer awe of standing before the supreme ruler of all universes, you can't exactly walk up and give him a hug, right? The massive scale of that majesty naturally prevents anyone from experiencing spontaneous, reciprocal, equal love with the divine. The reverence literally gets in the way of the relationship. And there is a brilliant story that shows this exact problem in action. It's the famous anecdote from chapter 11 of the Bhagavad Gita. So Arjuna has genuinely known Krishna as a close, dear friend. They joke around, they hang out, they're buddies. But then, Krishna reveals his universal form, his Vishwarupa. He shows Arjuna his infinite, cosmic, terrifyingly majestic sovereignty. And what happens to Arjuna's casual friendship? It completely collapses. Arjuna just starts trembling, bowing down, and actually begging for forgiveness for ever calling Krishna his friend. The majesty actively destroyed the sweet familiarity. The relationship went from super intimate to incredibly distant in just a matter of seconds. That leads us to Section 4, Yoga Maya, the power of intimacy. So if majesty just destroys intimacy, how on earth does a divine experience true, sweet love? Well, enter Yogamaya. Yogamaya is an expression of the internal spiritual potency, the Antaranga Shakti. And listen, we are entirely redefining the word illusion here. Yogamaya is absolutely not an illusion of ignorance. It is a liberating kind of forgetfulness. It's basically a divine artistry that actively hides or selectively backgrounds God's omnipotence and majesty. Why? So that true, spontaneous play, which is called lila, can actually happen. It literally makes the devotee forget they're dealing with the Supreme Creator, just so they can unconditionally love Him. And the direct, beautiful result of Yogamaya doing its thing is Madhurya. Madhurya means divine sweetness, intimate accessibility, and even vulnerability within love. Because Yogamaya drops the curtain on all that crushing cosmic awe, this sweetness is allowed to completely dominate the experience. The divine goes from overwhelmingly majestic to wonderfully approachable. When we put these two devotional landscapes head to head, the transformation is just radical. Look at majesty-focused devotion on the left. You perceive the divine as the Supreme Lord. The tone is pure reverence and awe, and the relational distance is massive. It's very much creator versus created. But then look on the right, under Yogamaya, in sweetness-focused devotion. Here, you perceive the divine as a beloved, a child, or a dear friend. The tone is tenderness and spontaneity. And that massive distance? It's gone, negligible. You are in a beautifully reciprocal, equal relationship. I actually love this specific anecdote from the Bhagavata Purana because it perfectly, shows Yogamaya in action. So, Mother Yashoda is looking into baby Krishna's mouth because she suspects he's been eating dirt. Classic mom move, right? But inside his mouth, she suddenly sees the entire universe, like all of cosmic reality, right there. For a brief second, she is completely overwhelmed by the absolute majesty of God. But what happens next? Yogamaya immediately steps in and backgrounds that majesty. It restores her normal maternal affection. She completely forgets the universe part and just goes back to worrying that her little boy is hungry. Yogamaya steps in to protect the intimacy of a mother's love from the absolute shock of cosmic awe. There's this really profound quote directly from the research that sums this up. Yogamaya is the potency of the impossible, allowing the infinite to become a child without ceasing to be infinite. And man, that is the absolute genius of this theology. You see, Yogamaya doesn't make God less divine. It doesn't strip away a single ounce of omnipotence. The majesty remains entirely ontologically true, but Yogamaya perfectly curates the experiential reality so that love can take center stage. So let's put the two faces of Maya right next to each other so we firmly lock in this fundamental contrast. On one side, you have Mahamaya. This is the illusion that binds. It obscures your true spiritual identity to keep you locked inside the material world. On the other side, you have Yogamaya. This is the illusion that frees. It obscures Krishna's cosmic majesty to liberate the soul into the purest, most intimate forms of love. It's so wild. One uses forgetfulness as a prison, and the other uses forgetfulness as the master key to the ultimate relationship. And that brings us to our final section, Section 5, the relational absolute. So what does this intricate, layered theology ultimately mean for how we understand reality itself? Well, the beautiful conclusion of this entire framework is that, according to Gaudiya Vaishnavism, ultimate reality is not just some empty, impersonal void, and it's definitely not just a distant, monolithic monarch sitting up on a throne somewhere. At its absolute highest level, reality is a dynamic, ever-fresh exchange of love, which the tradition calls rasa. The ultimate purpose of divine existence, the whole reason the internal potencies and Yogamaya orchestrate all of this, is for relational bliss. The absolute is fundamentally relational. I want to leave you with a lingering thought to chew on today. If the very fabric of ultimate reality isn't just raw, unfiltered power, but an inexhaustible, carefully curated exchange of intimate love, how does that change the way we view our own daily pursuit of connection? I mean, if the divine itself requires an intricate illusion just to experience the sweetness of vulnerability, it really makes you rethink the immense power and importance of our own relationships, doesn't it? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Stay curious and keep exploring.